Get out! You don't look like someone who belongs in first class, and I'm not about to let you scam your way on board. So either leave now, or I'll have you removed in front of everyone." That was the exact sentence, sharp and loud. That rang through Gate C-12 at Seattle-Tacoma International Airport as dozens of heads turned toward the commotion. The words came not from an angry passenger or a stranger off the street, but from Diane Kessler, the lead flight attendant of Horizon Air Flight 392. Her voice cut through the quiet murmur of the boarding area like a blade, and every syllable hit with the cold precision of someone who believed they had the authority to humiliate. But what Diane didn't know, what no one at that gate realized in that moment, was that the woman she was insulting was Nia Jackson, the CEO of Horizon Air and owner of 40% of the company's shares. In just 12 minutes, Diane would lose her job, the crew would be grounded, and the future of the airline would begin to change, all because of this one reckless moment of judgment. Before we dive into the story, I want to know, where are you watching from? Drop your city or state in the comments. And if you believe no one should ever be treated this way based on how they look, subscribe to the channel and give this video a like. It helps more than you know. And stories like this need to be heard. Now let's board Flight 392 together, where appearances were judged, voices were raised, and justice arrived seat by seat. It was exactly 6 p.m. when Nia stepped quietly into the priority boarding lane for first class, wearing a simple navy blue t-shirt, non-branded jeans, and white sneakers. Nothing flashy, nothing corporate. Her only accessory was a small leather bag slung over her shoulder and the calm confidence of someone who had built an $8 billion aviation portfolio from the ground up. But today, she wasn't here as an executive. She was here undercover, following weeks of anonymous complaints filed by passengers of color who said they were routinely dismissed, disrespected, or doubted on Horizon flights. The reports had shaken Nia. Too much of it mirrored what she herself had experienced earlier in her life. And so, without cameras, assistants, or corporate entourage, she decided to see for herself. She'd boarded dozens of planes before, had been greeted with smiles and champagne in first-class lounges all over the world. But now, as she held out her perfectly valid boarding pass to Diane, she saw something familiar flicker in the woman's eyes, a look she knew all too well, disbelief that someone who looked like her could possibly be sitting in seat 1A. Diane didn't even glance at the ticket. "Ma'am, this lane is for first class," she said flatly, as if Nia had made a mistake. Nia nodded, calmly. "I'm aware." She held out the pass again, this time. Diane took it with 2 fingers, as if it were dirty. She stared at it for a second before scoffing. "This has to be fake." Before Nia could speak, Diane turned her head and said loudly, "Mark, can you verify this? I think we've got a situation." Her voice was purposefully loud, drawing attention from others nearby. Mark Brennan, another flight attendant standing just beyond the gate door, walked over, already smirking. He leaned into his handheld intercom system and called out, "Gate control, we have a questionable boarding pass here. Can you cross-check it?" The word questionable hung in the air like a cloud of smoke. Passengers waiting nearby began to turn their heads, whispering. That's when Liam Park, a Korean-American travel vlogger seated near the front of the boarding area, quietly pulled out his phone and hit record. His friend Emma Collins, a freelance writer traveling beside him, whispered, "Are you seeing this?" Liam nodded grimly. "She hasn't done anything wrong." Back at the gate, Nia's eyes narrowed, her voice steady. "That boarding pass is mine. I'd like it returned." Diane didn't respond. Instead, Chloe Lynn, a younger flight attendant who had just joined the group, stepped forward, grabbed the pass from Diane's hand, and said with an amused look, There's no way someone dressed like this paid for first class. You probably found this in the trash. With that, she tucked the ticket into her uniform pocket and turned away. The insult wasn't shouted, but it didn't have to be. Its cruelty was deliberate, razor sharp. Javier Morales, the gate agent stationed at C-12, looked on with visible discomfort. He had greeted Nia minutes earlier and had checked her documents himself. He knew everything was valid. "Diane," he said carefully, "I already confirmed her boarding. She's on the manifest." Diane waved him off. "Then you must have made a mistake. She's clearly not who she claims to be." From a few rows away, Emma raised her phone and whispered, "This is disgusting. I'm filming too." Nia took a small breath, restraining the storm building inside her. It wasn't the first time something like this had happened. At 22, she'd been denied boarding on a business trip because a gate agent assumed her low-budget suit and dark skin meant she was lost. That moment had stayed with her, lit a fire that pushed her through business school, private equity, and eventually the boardroom. And now, 2 decades later, it was happening again. Only this time, the stakes were different. This time, she had the power. "Give me back my boarding pass," Nia said. Calmly but firmly, Chloe turned her head slightly, smirking. "Why don't you go talk to security?" Diane crossed her arms. "We'll need you to step aside. Ma'am, you're holding up the real passengers." The words hit like ice water. Nia looked around. A small crowd had now gathered, some whispering, others watching in uncomfortable silence. Liam stepped closer, holding up his phone. "This is wrong," he said aloud. "I don't know who you think she is, but this is harassment." Diane turned to him, annoyed. "Sir, please stop filming." Liam didn't lower his phone. "I'll stop when you start treating people like humans." Suddenly, Emma stepped toward Chloe and reached out, brushing her hand lightly against the uniform pocket. "I can read that ticket from here," she said. "It clearly says Seat 1A, Jackson." Several passengers nearby gasped audibly. Javier stepped forward again. "That's the same ticket I scanned earlier." Diane's face twisted in irritation. "We'll get to the bottom of it," she snapped. "But until then, she's not boarding," Mark added mockingly. "Maybe she should call whoever she thinks bought her that seat." Nia turned slightly, pulled her phone from her bag, and dialed a number. "Tara," she said softly when the line picked up. "Activate the internal system. I'm standing at C-12, Flight 392, now." On the other end, Tara Evans, her executive assistant, replied without hesitation, "It's done. You just say the word." Nia looked up and locked eyes with Diane. "You've made a serious mistake." Chloe didn't hesitate, with a tight smile and the same icy confidence Diane wore like perfume. She took one step closer to Nia and held up the boarding pass like it was evidence in a trial. "This ticket's fake. I don't know who you're trying to fool, but you're not getting on this flight. Leave now, or we'll have security drag you out. Your scam ends here." Her voice was sharp enough to turn heads throughout the first-class cabin. Mark Brennan, still standing near the entryway of the plane, added fuel with a louder voice, waving toward the gate. "Get out, before this delays everyone else." Then, without warning, he reached out and gripped Nia's forearm, not forcefully, but firm enough that the passengers nearby gasped in shock. "We don't have time for this," he growled. "You're not even supposed to be here." Nia didn't flinch. She didn't pull back. She simply stood her ground, looking directly into Mark's eyes and saying with a voice quieter than before, but with the weight of stone, "Take your hand off me," Chloe barked. "She's a fraud." Louder than necessary, as if trying to drown out the mounting discomfort. But it was Javier Morales, the gate agent, who finally stepped forward again. "That's enough," he said, his voice steady, gaze locked on Mark. "She's on the manifest. I checked her documents myself." You're the ones in the wrong here. Diane shot him a glare so sharp it could have cracked glass. You want to lose your job too, Javier? She snapped, loud enough for passengers to hear. Then keep defending liars. Just a few feet away, Emma Collins was still filming, her hands now trembling with anger. I can't believe this is happening in front of everyone, she said, her voice cracking. You're humiliating her. Liam, still holding his own phone, turned to the surrounding passengers. You all see what this is, right? This isn't about protocol. This is about how she looks. Someone near the back muttered in agreement. Diane turned toward the two of them, trying to seize back control. You're not allowed to film airline personnel. That's a violation of FAA policy. But Javier quickly cut in. That's not true. Not if it's for accountability. And that's when something shifted. Passengers started murmuring louder. Phones began to lift. People had seen enough. And then, loud enough to echo in the cabin, a woman in row 2A said, She didn't do anything. Let her sit down. The tension, once a quiet storm, now churned in the open. But Naya had no intention of backing down. Not anymore. She glanced at her phone again. On the other end of the line, Tara Evans, her executive assistant, had been quietly logging every second of the incident into Horizon Air's internal oversight system. Tara, Nia said softly, I want the bias incident protocol activated. This is going to escalate. Tara responded instantly. Already in motion. Timestamp's been logged. Witness accounts coming in. Just say the word when you're ready to go public. Nia didn't speak. She didn't need to. Not yet. Diane, however, was only getting bolder. I've seen people like her try this before, she hissed to Mark, not bothering to lower her voice. They print fake tickets, act entitled, think someone like them can just waltz into first class. Not on my plane. The word them landed like a slap. Nia heard it. So did Liam. So did Emma. So did everyone within earshot. Javier turned sharply. You just crossed a line, he said, eyes blazing. That woman has more right to be on this flight than anyone else in this room. Diane ignored him and turned back to Nia. Show me the card you used to buy this. Now. Nia raised a brow. You mean the corporate card with my name on it? She asked, her tone bone dry. I'll be happy to, but I'd recommend you check your facts before this situation gets worse. Mark stepped in again, his voice hard. Ma'am, if you don't cooperate, we will call security. Javier stepped between them. You'll do no such thing. I'm the gate agent of record, and I'm reporting you from behind. Emma's voice rang out. You want proof? I've got video from the last 5 minutes. I'll send it to Horizon Air myself. You think they'll side with you after this? Diane glared at her. You're not involved. Emma shook her head. I am now. You made it public the second you tried to throw her out in front of everyone. Passengers began speaking up. A man in 1B leaned forward and said, She hasn't raised her voice. She hasn't cursed. She showed you a valid ticket. And you're treating her like a criminal? Another added. This is outrageous. For a brief moment, Diane hesitated, but then she snapped back into performance mode. This is my plane, she declared, and I make the calls in this cabin, and right now, I'm calling for her removal. Mark moved again, faster this time, but Javier placed himself firmly between them. Touch her again, he said, and I'll have you removed. Nia stared Diane in the face and said, You've just violated Horizon Air's internal anti-bias code, Section 4.6, and I know that, because I helped write it. Diane blinked. Thrown. What? Nia didn't elaborate. She simply turned back to Tara. Escalate it. On the other end of the line, Tara's voice was calm but direct. Incident escalated. Executives flagged, legal notified. Just say the word. Diane still didn't get it, but her smirk was starting to slip. The energy in the cabin had fully shifted. Chloe looked uncomfortable now, and Mark, who had started the incident with so much swagger, was no longer speaking. Javier nodded at Nia and said quietly, "I've got your back. Whatever this is, it's wrong." And then came the medium twist. Javier turned toward the crowd and, with a trembling voice, added, "This isn't the first time Diane's done something like this. We've had complaints, multiple ones, passenger discrimination, ticket mishandling, verbal mistreatment. Every time, it got buried. But I remember, and I've had enough." The silence that followed was absolute. Diane stood frozen, lips slightly parted. Chloe took a step back. Nia nodded slowly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Then let's not bury this one. And now, to you, the viewer. What would you say to Diane if you were standing in that cabin? What would your voice sound like if it were your mother, your sister, your friend being humiliated like this? Comment below. Let your words stand where justice tried to be silenced." "Remove her!" Diane barked, her voice trembling with fury, but not fear. Not yet. She didn't know what was coming. She pointed directly at Nia as if issuing a command to the universe. "She doesn't belong here. Get her off this aircraft. Now!" Chloe, always one beat behind, but eager to prove her loyalty, grabbed the intercom handset beside the galley door and, without so much as looking at her supervisor, blared into the cabin. "We're experiencing a boarding delay due to an unauthorized individual attempting to access the first-class section. Please remain patient." The moment the announcement hit the passengers' ears, gasps erupted from nearly every row. Emma stood up instantly. "That's a lie!" she yelled. "She's not unauthorized. She's on the manifest." Liam swung around with his phone, camera pointed now at Chloe. "You just made a legal statement over a cabin-wide system. That's a recorded lie, and I've got the whole thing." Diane's expression wavered for the first time. Her hands, previously so sure and steady, curled into fists. "Turn that camera off," she snapped, but Liam didn't flinch. "Not until someone turns off the racism." Mark lunged forward again, clearly acting on Diane's order, and placed his hand on Nia's shoulder. "Time's up," he said, teeth clenched. "You're leaving." But before he could pull her, Javier stepped between them once more, this time with steel in his voice. "Touch her again," he said coldly, "and I will deactivate this flight myself." Mark looked stunned. Diane spat. "You'll be unemployed before the engines warm up." Javier didn't even blink. "Better unemployed than complicit." Around them, the cabin stirred, more phones raised, more eyes glaring, not at Nia, but at the crew. This wasn't just a misunderstanding anymore. It had become a theater of prejudice, and the audience had chosen sides. Nia stayed silent through it all, letting the chaos swirl around her. Her silence wasn't surrender. It was restraint. At age 28, she'd been shoved aside by a gate agent in Chicago after being told, "People like you don't fly first class on holiday weekends." That humiliation had nearly broken her, but it had also driven her to launch her first startup. Every slight became fuel. Every moment like this, stored and cataloged. She wasn't going to raise her voice now. She didn't need to. Everyone else was finally raising theirs. From the back of the first-class cabin, a young black woman in 3C stood up, clutching her boarding pass. "I know that feeling," she said, loud and clear. "I've had it happen to me, and I've never had the guts to say anything before. But this isn't right." A man in 2D nodded. "It's not just wrong, it's a pattern." Chloe muttered something under her breath, but before she could speak aloud, Liam cut in. "Say it louder. Chloe, let's all hear what you have to say." She said nothing. Diane, still clinging to some illusion of control, tried to regain the narrative. "This disruption is unacceptable. Horizon Air does not tolerate fraudulent behavior. But Emma interrupted, shouting, "Neither do we! And right now! You're the fraud!" Nia finally looked up. She locked eyes with Diane and spoke with calm, chilling precision. "You keep saying I don't belong, but I belong more to this airline than you ever will." Diane scoffed. "Oh, really? You bought a first-class seat? Good for you. Doesn't mean you can rewrite policy?" Nia didn't break eye contact. "No, but being CEO means I already have—" That sentence didn't land immediately. It hovered in the air for a second, as though the cabin itself paused to let it register. And then Diane blinked. Chloe looked confused. Mark's mouth parted slightly. "What?" he asked, uncertain now. "You're... who?" Before Nia could respond, Emma stood up and called out, "Everyone, she's the CEO. She is Horizon Air." That triggered a ripple through the cabin. Phones shot higher. Voices overlapped. "You're kidding. That can't be—" "Wait, what did she just say?" Liam turned his camera toward Nia. "Is that true?" he asked. "Are you really the CEO?" But Nia didn't answer. Not yet. She simply turned and said to Tara, still on the open call, "Let legal know the window's closing. I'm ready to act." Tara's voice came through the speaker clearly. "Understood. We're standing by." Diane heard that. Her face went pale, and her hand slipped from her hip. Mark backed up half a step, suddenly unsure. This has gone too far," he mumbled. "We're just following protocol," Javier replied instantly. "Protocol doesn't involve harassing passengers based on what they wear or what color they are." Then, without being told, the passengers in rows 1 through 3 stood together. They stepped into the narrow aisle and formed an unspoken blockade between Nia and the crew. The air thickened. Diane hissed, "What are you doing?" A man in 1B looked her square in the eye. "Protecting her. The same way we wish someone had protected us." Chloe's voice cracked as she said, "This is getting out of control." Liam replied, "It was never in control. It was in denial." Diane turned toward the galley, as if looking for backup, but there was none left. The crowd had chosen its side, and it wasn't with her. Emma raised her phone again. "You have seconds left before this becomes the biggest PR disaster your airline has ever seen." Nia still hadn't declared her identity. She was letting the passengers speak for her, letting their unity tell the story. Then came the large twist. Javier stepped forward, faced Diane directly, and said, "I filed a report about you 3 months ago for doing this exact thing to another passenger. You claimed their ID was forged. Management buried it. But I remember, and now, so does everyone else." Diane opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Her face flushed. Chloe slowly pulled the boarding pass from her pocket and, without a word, held it out. Nia didn't take it. She looked around the room, then back to Chloe and said, "You're not in control anymore." Now, to you watching at home, what would you have done in that moment? If someone you love were publicly humiliated like this, would you stay silent or stand? Tell us in the comments, because silence protects the guilty. And stories like this, they only get told if people like you refuse to look away. Mark moved again, this time more aggressively. "We've given you every chance," he growled, stepping toward Nia with outstretched hands. "You're leaving this plane now." He didn't ask. He didn't wait. He reached for her arm like he had the authority to take her somewhere she didn't belong. But the cabin had changed. Everything had changed. Before he could touch her again, a wall of people stepped forward. Row 1, then row 2, then 3. Liam, Emma, the woman from 3C, the man from 1B, Even the elderly couple in 2A and 2B, who hadn't said a word until now, stood. "Back off," one of them snapped. "You're not laying a finger on her." The human barrier tightened, and Mark was stuck. "Move!" he barked at the passengers, but no one budged. "I said move!" Still, they stood shoulder to shoulder, arms folded, unmoving. Diane's voice rang out in panic. "This is a federal offense, obstructing a flight crew." But her tone had shifted. It wasn't authority anymore. It was desperation. Chloe stood frozen, still clutching the boarding pass like it was some kind of shield. Javier held up a hand, stepping between them again. "You've pushed this far enough. You tried to remove a verified first-class passenger. You made an announcement over the intercom calling her an intruder. You've insulted her, grabbed her, and now you're ordering her off the plane while passengers are filming and filing complaints in real time. Stop talking." Diane opened her mouth to snap back. But it was Mark who broke first. His shoulders sank. "This isn't what I signed up for," he muttered. I thought she was lying." He looked around at the rows of passengers who had stood in defense of the woman he had tried to eject. He looked at Chloe, who was now biting her lip, her hand trembling slightly. And then, finally, he looked at Diane, but she wasn't looking at anyone. She was staring straight ahead, eyes unfocused, like someone who had just realized they were in a different movie than they thought. Nia didn't say a word. She hadn't moved since the start of the standoff. Her breathing was steady, her hands relaxed. Her silence was louder than any shout. On the phone in her palm, Tara Evans was still connected, her voice quiet but ready. "Nia," she said gently, "Sarah Mitchell is on the line. She's been briefed." Sarah, board member, longtime corporate ally, one of the few people at the top who had always backed reform. "She's waiting for your go." Nia nodded once. "Put her through." Diane's eyes flicked toward her, confused. Sarah's voice came through the speaker. "Nia, you give the word, and this crew is grounded, permanently." Diane took a step forward, her voice finally cracking. "Who are you talking to? What are you doing?" But Nia didn't answer her. She never looked at Diane again. Her eyes stayed on the passengers, the people who had stood up, who had formed a line between her and injustice. "Sarah," Nia said clearly, "I want to begin immediate termination protocol for Diane Kessler. I want Mark Brennan grounded pending review, Chloe Lynn as well, effective now." There was a pause on the other end. Then Sarah said, "Understood. Consider it done." Diane flinched like the words had struck her. "Wait, what are you saying?" she demanded. "You can't." But Nia raised her voice slightly, not loud, but firm enough to stop the entire cabin. "I'm saying I'm Nia Jackson, CEO of Horizon Air, and I just removed 3 employees from service for violating the very policies they swore to uphold. You treated a valid passenger like a criminal. You denied my boarding, attempted to publicly humiliate me, and incited chaos inside this aircraft. And now? You're done." A hush fell over the cabin. Someone dropped a pen. Someone else whispered, "Oh my God." And then Chloe, who had been standing behind Diane the whole time, let the boarding pass fall to the floor. It landed near Nia's feet. Chloe didn't bend to pick it up. She just stared at it. Then, without a word, she turned and walked slowly toward the galley, eyes shining. Mark didn't move. Diane stood frozen, mouth open slightly, one hand raised mid-air as if she were about to make a final, useless argument. But no words came. Tara's voice came through again. "Termination confirmed. System's been logged. Crew suspension effective immediately." Then another voice followed hers. Sarah, calmly adding, "Media is preparing a statement. We're backing you fully. Do what needs to be done." Diane finally found her voice. "You're ruining everything," she hissed. All of this, for what? Nia turned to her slowly, eyes steady. No. You ruined it. The moment you opened your mouth and decided I didn't belong based on how I looked. You ruined your own career. All I did was finally stop pretending you were someone I had to tolerate. Passengers slowly returned to their seats, whispering, recording, some still stunned, some clapping quietly. Javier approached Nia. "I've worked this gate for 3 years," he said, "and I've never seen anything like that." Nia smiled faintly. "You stood up when it counted. That matters." He lowered his head, touched. "Thank you." Mark shuffled toward the jet bridge, dazed, escorted now by another gate staffer. Chloe remained in the galley, out of sight. Diane, still rigid in the aisle, was now clearly trembling. "You think this ends here?" she spat. "You'll get backlash. You'll get blowback." Nia tilted her head. "Maybe. But you're not flying today. I am." And with that, she stepped over the boarding pass that had once been stolen from her, paused at row 1A, and placed her bag on the seat that had always been hers, the seat they tried to keep from her. And just before sitting down, Nia turned to the cabin and addressed everyone, not loudly, but with the calm of someone reclaiming her space. "For those of you who spoke up, thank you. You didn't know who I was. You didn't need to. You just knew something was wrong. And you acted. That's what changes things." Then she sat, pulled the seatbelt over her lap, and leaned back as if nothing had ever happened. Even though everything had... The silence that followed was not empty. It was weight. It pressed on everyone in the cabin like cabin pressure shifting mid-flight. For several seconds after Nia sat down in seat 1A, no one moved. The passengers, once buzzing with murmurs and cell phone whispers, were now still, staring, not in disbelief, but in dawning recognition. A storm had passed through the aircraft, but it hadn't just blown through. It had rearranged the entire sky. Diane remained standing several rows away, frozen in place, her expression a warped cocktail of disbelief and indignation. Her arms, once crossed in command, now hung limply at her sides. Mark had disappeared down the jet bridge without a word, eyes hollow. Chloe lingered in the galley, out of view, her posture hunched, her energy collapsed inward. It was over, but not done. Because Nia Jackson had not just claimed her seat. She was about to claim the airline's conscience. Nia took out her phone again and tapped once. "Tara," she said quietly. "Patch Sarah back in, put her on speaker." Within seconds, the soft chime of connection sounded, followed by Sarah Mitchell's calm voice. "I'm on. Go ahead." Nia stood again, not because she needed to, but because she wanted to face the cabin, to look directly at the people who had stood up when the crew failed to... "Ladies and gentlemen," she said, voice composed yet undeniably resonant. "My name is Nia Jackson. I am the CEO of Horizon Air, and I own 40% of this company. I boarded this flight undercover to investigate recent complaints of mistreatment and bias. What you just witnessed, what you participated in, is exactly why I'm here. Not because I expected it, but because I've lived it before." A gasp swept across the rows. Several passengers leaned forward. Others pulled out phones again, but no one interrupted. "Diane Kessler," Nia continued, "as of this moment, you are terminated from Horizon Air. Your behavior, your words, and your disregard for protocol, dignity, and basic human decency have disqualified you from continuing in this company. Your authority in this cabin is revoked." She didn't wait for a response. "Mark Brennan and Chloe Lynn are hereby grounded indefinitely pending a full ethics review. Chloe will also be permanently barred from re-employment at Horizon." That last sentence broke Chloe. From the galley came a small noise, half sob, half breath. Then a whisper, "I didn't mean to. I thought I was doing what I was told." Nia turned slightly in her direction. "You didn't just obey. You volunteered." Javier, standing near the front, blinked rapidly. The weight of what had just happened was beginning to catch up to him. "Does this mean?" he asked softly. Nia gave him a nod. "Yes. You stood for what was right, even when it meant standing alone. I'm recommending your immediate promotion, effective today." A round of light applause came from the passengers, not because of the drama, but because of the relief. Someone had done the right thing, and it finally mattered. Sarah's voice returned through the speaker. "All actions are logged. Press statement pending. Legals preparing language. You have our full support. Nia." Diane still hadn't spoken. She stood like a discarded statue, abandoned by the very authority she once weaponized. Her voice finally cracked through the quiet. "You think this makes you better than us?" Nia tilted her head, eyes calm. "No. I think it proves I was never beneath you." Emma stepped forward from her seat, phone lowered now, hands trembling with adrenaline. "I've never seen anything like this," she said. "And I've flown all over. But this felt personal. Thank you for doing what most CEOs never do. Show up." Liam joined her, his voice still tight from the earlier confrontation. "I'll delete the footage if you want," he said. "But if this ever happens again, if someone else needs proof, it's here." Nia nodded. "Keep it. I don't need public spectacle, but I do need people to remember what silence enables." Just as she was about to sit again, a voice came from behind. It was soft, unsteady. Mark. He had returned to the cabin entrance, his uniform rumpled, his face drained. "Wait," he said. "I need to say something." Everyone turned. Even Diane turned, startled. "You don't have to," Nia said. "You're no longer under obligation." But Mark shook his head. "I'm not doing it as crew. I'm doing it as a human." He stepped forward slowly, voice cracking, eyes not on Nia, but on the passengers. "This wasn't the first time. Diane, she's been doing this for years. She always justified it as instinct, said she could spot liars, scammers, people trying to sneak into first. But it was always the same pattern, same kind of passengers, same assumptions." He swallowed. "And I let it happen. I laughed along. I looked away. But today, it was too much. And I broke." Diane's voice came sharp and low. "You're a coward." Mark turned to her. "No, I was a coward. Today, I told the truth." That confession hit harder than anything yet. It wasn't just Diane. It wasn't just Chloe. It was systemic, hidden in routines, whispered in galleys, embedded in training manuals no one ever rewrote. Nia exhaled slowly, then lifted her phone again. "Tara," she said, "add a full audit to the reform plan. I want every passenger complaint in the last 5 years reopened, and I want Mark's statement added to the report." Tara's voice came back, clear and unwavering. "Already writing it. The entire airline's watching, Nia, and for the first time. They're scared for the right reasons." The passengers remained still, silent witnesses to a moment that had turned from humiliation into justice, from suspicion into structural change. Nia looked across the cabin and said, "This wasn't about me. It was never about me. It's about the fact that every time someone is doubted, questioned, or excluded for how they look, we excuse it as a misunderstanding. But today, someone answered back, and that matters." She sat once more. This time, no one looked away. The shift from confrontation to transformation wasn't loud. It was methodical, with the cabin now calm but emotionally charged. Nia stayed seated in 1A, not because she was tired, but because she needed the silence to settle. Her phone remained on, connected directly to Tara Evans and Sarah Mitchell, who were now coordinating the internal processes in real time. "Tara," she said steadily, "initiate Phase 1. I want full suspension notices delivered to all 3 crew members before this aircraft leaves the gate. Confirm system lockout, and reroute this crew off the rotation entirely." Tara's voice came back instantly, already typing as she spoke. "Done. Access revoked. Their credentials are locked. Flight schedules updated. Legal has final clearance. Sarah just gave the green light to begin the reform protocol publicly." Nia nodded and raised her eyes to the passengers who had supported her, who had stood when the crew failed. "Ladies and gentlemen, I know this flight didn't begin how you expected, but let me assure you, it will end differently for this airline. Today, your voices forced accountability to happen in real time because of you. Change begins now." A soft ripple of applause moved through the rows, not for the spectacle, but for the justice. Javier, still by the galley wall, looked visibly moved. "What does reform actually mean?" he asked, uncertain if it was okay to speak now. Nia smiled gently. "It means no more buried complaints, no more silent reviews. Every incident of bias in this company will be reopened. Every training program rewritten, every crew member retrained. From this moment forward, discrimination is not a policy violation. It's a career-ending offense." Javier nodded, his face lit by a cautious hope. Behind him, Chloe remained motionless, back pressed against the wall. Her eyes were red, but she said nothing. But then came the voice Nia didn't expect. From the rear of the first-class cabin, Diane, still unremoved, still holding on to the last threads of her former authority, spoke. Her voice was hoarse, almost raw. "You think this company's clean?" she rasped. "You think it ends with us?" Nia turned toward her slowly. Diane's face was no longer arrogant. It was angry, cornered. "You want the truth?" she said, eyes locked on Nia. "We were told not to make mistakes with certain kinds of passengers. We were told who to watch, not just by policy, by management. I didn't make this culture. I survived in it." For a moment, the cabin was silent. And then, quietly, Nia said, "Say that again." Diane's voice cracked. "Regional leadership gave us unspoken lists, people to profile, dress codes to flag, names to double-check. It was all implied. They never wrote it down, but everyone understood. That was the massive twist. The bias hadn't been rogue. It had been systemic, baked into the unspoken culture of operations, passed down in meetings behind closed doors." Nia's jaw tightened. "Do you have names?" she asked. Diane nodded slowly. 3, all regional. You'll find them in your own HR logs if you know where to look." Tara's voice came through immediately. "I'm listening," she said. "I'll cross-check her claims against flagged reports and complaint patterns. If there's a pattern, we'll uncover it." Sarah chimed in from her line. "If this holds, it won't just be terminations. It'll be a federal compliance review. I'll notify legal." Nia looked around at the passengers again, her tone still measured but ironclad. "This is why we don't ignore moments like this. Because when you peel back the surface, you don't just find one person's prejudice, you find a system that protected it." A woman near the front, someone who hadn't spoken yet, raised her hand slightly. "I was profiled on a Horizon flight last year. They said I didn't match my ID." Her voice trembled. "But I never reported it. I figured no one would believe me." Nia looked at her with unwavering warmth. "They will now." Behind her, Javier stepped forward. "If there's anything I can do to help, even beyond this flight, say the word." Nia turned to him, her voice soft. "You already did, and that's why I want you on the team reviewing these complaints." He blinked. Seriously? Seriously? She said, I need people who don't just understand the rules. I need people who remember what it feels like when they're broken. At the front of the plane, a second gate agent arrived quietly and escorted Diane toward the jet bridge. She didn't fight. She didn't speak again. And this time, no one watched her go. They turned instead to Naya, who remained in her seat, one hand on her phone, the other pressed lightly over her heart. The cabin had gone from conflict to clarity. The reform had begun. Not in a press release, not in a boardroom, but right here, seat by seat, witness by witness, 3 months later. The ripple from Flight 392 hadn't faded. It had spread. Diane, Mark, and Chloe had all been officially terminated following internal review, with Diane permanently barred from working in commercial aviation, again after multiple passenger complaints surfaced from past flights. Federal regulators had launched a quiet investigation into Horizon's regional management practices. Following the leads Diane reluctantly gave, the 3 names she'd mentioned were quietly removed from their posts after logs and internal communications confirmed they had fostered a culture of targeted surveillance against passengers who didn't look the part. Nia had not returned to flying immediately after that day. She'd spent the summer meeting with cabin crew, revising outdated training manuals, and rebuilding her airline's image from the inside out. But she hadn't done it for headlines. There were none. The story of what happened on Flight 392 never made it to social media during the flight. Emma and Liam honored their word, and though the footage remained archived, it was never posted. What happened instead was more powerful: an internal reckoning, a culture reset, and a grassroots shift across Horizon's employee network. A bias reporting hotline was launched. A full-time equity board was installed. And at the center of it all, guiding every new policy with the same calm fire she had shown in Seat 1A, was Nia Jackson. She received over 1,200 letters in the weeks that followed, most of them from strangers who had never flown with Horizon, but who had seen the quiet changes reflected across the industry. A pilot from another airline wrote, "I don't know what happened on that plane, but whatever you did, it changed our training overnight." A flight attendant in Texas wrote, "Because of you, we're no longer afraid to speak up when someone crosses a line." But it was the handwritten letter from a passenger on Flight 392 that sat framed on Nia's office wall. It read, in careful cursive, "You didn't raise your voice. You raised the bar. You made dignity feel possible again." That note came from the woman in 3C, the one who had stood up when Mark reached for Nia. Her name was Deborah, and in the letter she described how she had never stood up for herself in the face of bias before that moment. But seeing everyone else stand for Nia gave her the courage she didn't know she still had. Chloe Lynn, surprisingly, had written too. Her letter came with no return address. It was short, just 2 paragraphs. In it, she apologized, not only to Nia, but to the passengers she had disrespected in her career. She wrote, "I didn't realize how much I had absorbed until that day. You exposed it in front of everyone. I'll never forget the silence after you said, 'You volunteered.' It haunted me. In a way it needed to." She closed with, "Thank you for not destroying me. You could have. Instead, you showed me who I was, and that's something I needed more than punishment." And now, as Nia stood once again at Seattle-Tacoma's Gate C-12, this time in a sharp navy blazer, walking openly under her own name, she didn't feel bitterness. She felt resolve. Javier was there, now wearing a black Horizon name tag that read Equity and Passenger Experience Officer. They exchanged a smile. No words needed. As passengers boarded the new flight, they were handed discreet cards reminding them of Horizon's new Passenger Bill of Rights, each one approved by Nia herself. In the corner of every card were 3 words, "Dignity flies." Here. But not everything ended quietly. The final twist came in the form of a second audit, one requested by Horizon's Independent Ethics Board just weeks after the Flight 392 incident. That audit uncovered that over 36 passenger complaints over the past 4 years had been deliberately misfiled or left unresolved by a specific manager tied to Diane's prior base. It wasn't an accident. It was a cover-up. The manager, long since promoted, was removed from the company after the findings were verified. Nia hadn't anticipated that her 12 minutes in the cabin would crack open the company's deepest fault lines. But she hadn't been surprised either, because bias never stayed small. It spread, and when it wasn't named, it rotted everything it touched. Before boarding the new flight, Nia turned back one last time to the cabin, just for a second. Seat 1A sat empty, waiting, not just for her, but for whoever came next. For the passenger, someone might still doubt, question, underestimate, but not anymore. Not without consequences. And now, to you watching, if you've ever stayed silent in moments of bias, let this be your moment to change that. Share your thoughts below. Speak for the ones who couldn't. And if this story moved you, subscribe to this channel and share it with someone who needs to be reminded that silence isn't strength. Justice is.